Hello, and welcome to this review of the Survivors Club historical romance book series by Mary Balogh. The Survivors Club series follows 7 people tragically touched by the Napoleonic Wars. We have 5 men who were previous soldiers, injured or traumatized in various ways, 1 woman who witnessed her husband's torture and death, and 1 duke who opened his home and heart to the injured and lost his son in battle and his wife to suicide. The series brings all the heartache with all of these folks dealing with their inner demons, and the partners they meet have their own tragic pasts that need reckoning with. We see some familiar names throughout the series with characters we've met in previous Balog books, like the Bedouin series and its prequels, and the Simply series. The Proposal is book 1 of the series. We're introduced to the Survivors Club by way of a familiar character, Gwen, also known as Lady Muir. She is the widowed sister of Neville, the Earl of Kilbourne, from the Bedouin prequel One Night for Love. While out for a walk in Cornwall on a visit to her recently widowed friend, Gwen turns her ankle and is carried back by Hugo to the estate where he is staying. So Hugo is a newly titled gentleman, a son of a tradesperson, awarded after a heroic effort during the war that left many dead, and him shipped home in a straitjacket. Although clearly attracted to each other, Gwen and Hugo must deal with their respective histories, social class differences, and overall initial resistance to each other. But overall, it's great to see Gwen finally get her happy ending after learning about how she miscarried and then shortly thereafter lost her husband. Next up, we have The Suitor. It is a short novella that serves as a prequel to book 2 of the series. So, our blind Viscount is being set up by his matchmaking grandmother, mother, and sisters. The lady that they brought for him to court has actually been in love with someone else and just waiting for her debut into society and for that gentleman to clean up his reputation. The novella is really the romance between that lady and her prior suitor. Really short and sweet. The suitor even turns out to be the nephew and heir to George, who's the Duke who hosted the Survivors Club in the first place. So next up, we have The Arrangement, and this is book 2. We have our charming and beautiful Viscount who is blinded in the war. He has escaped his meddling family members who tried to set him up with the girl from the suitor, and he is off on his own. Now, a quiet young lady rescues him from being compromised into marriage by her cousin, and then this lady's guardians toss her out. When our charming Viscount learns this, he offers her a marriage of convenience with the knowledge that they'd someday follow their separate, independent dreams. Overall, I loved how Sophia was able to help modify Vincent's estate for his use and his enjoyment, and how supportive she was of his independent lifestyle. This one starts slow, as most Balog novels do, but sometimes I really enjoy reading this pace of falling in love slowly and all the character driven emotion behind it. The Escape is book 3 of the series, and we have our hero Benedict, who has had his legs injured in the war and now painfully walks with canes, despite having been told he'd never walk again. He's pretty depressed and aimless, and finally coming to terms with the fact that he'll never regain full mobility and that he kind of doesn't know what to do with his life. His younger brother serves as the steward to his estate, and he doesn't want to kick his brother and his family out. While visiting his older sister, Ben meets Samantha, a recent widow who spent the past 5 years nursing her injured husband. She's in mourning, totally oppressed by her puritanical in laws, and they have quite the antagonistic first meeting, but they slowly find their way towards friendship and eventually more. I love how their friendship develops slowly over time and learning more about Samantha's family history and backstory. Book 4 is Only Enchanting. We have Flavian, who is a Viscount who suffered from traumatic brain injury with a very poor prognosis. So he was betrayed by his fiancée and best friend, who married each other while he was recovering. Many years later, his ex fiancee is now a widow, and his meddling mother and sister are trying to matchmake. Meanwhile, Flavian has met and danced with Agnes, a neighbor at his friend's estate. He feels calm and at peace when he's with her and ultimately offers her marriage. She believes that Flavian is a rake and a flirt and tries to avoid his advances, but eventually gives in. Now, the most interesting part of this book is the strange history that Flavian has with his ex fiance and the gaps in his memory that are slowly uncovered. So, not everything is as it seems, and we kind of figure out, well, why did he propose to this girl in the first place, and how did it all fall apart? Only a Promise is book 5. So we have Ralph, who feels terribly guilty that his 3 friends followed him to war and did not survive. He's cold and emotionless and empty. As heir to a dukedom from an elderly and ailing grandfather, he knows his immediate duty is to marry. Chloe is visiting the Duke and Duchess as she's the daughter of the Duchess's goddaughter, and she's trying to earn her keep by serving as a companion. She overhears the conversation between the Duchess and Ralph about him finding someone to marry, and so she proposes to him a marriage of convenience. No emotional ties, no disappointment. So Chloe's reputation is sort of mired in scandal because her younger sister ran off with a married man years ago, and there's recent speculation that her father is not actually her natural father. So she is totally looking forward to the comforts of an isolated lifestyle in the countryside. However, tragedy soon strikes after the wedding, and they're bound for the London season after all. Definitely a slow burn, angsty romance with all the drama you would expect from this author, and then you come to adore Ralph's grandparents throughout the story. Then we have book 6, Only a Kiss. The only woman of the club, Imogen, had witnessed her husband's torture and death while at war. She now lives in the dower house of her late husband's family estate, while her aunt in law lives in the main house with her cousin and companion. Now, we have the new Earl, Percy, having gained the title 2 years ago and visiting the estate for the first time. He is basically your dissolute, frivolous, indolent bachelor. He has come mainly to see if anything needs to be addressed on the estate, establish a trustworthy steward, and return to his frivolous city lifestyle in the city. Um, so we have Imogen and Percy. They again start with somewhat of an antagonistic relationship with a terrible, awkward first meeting, and neither of them are communicating clearly. However, they soon start a friendship and then an affair. Meanwhile, there's an underlying plot in town related to the issue of smuggling, and then there's a terrible backstory of how Imogen's husband found himself going to war in the first place with his wife in tow to tragic ends and circumstances. And then we have Only Beloved, which is book 7 and the final book of the series. We have our Duke of Stanbrook, the one who opened up his home and estate to all those survivors many years ago. His tragic backstory is that his only son had died in the war, and his wife was distraught about it and threw herself off a cliff at the estate. Now, the malicious rumor in town is that the Duke pushed her, but he didn't. And then his backstory is actually even more tragic than what we've been told this whole time, but it will take all book to unravel all of it. So now we're a few days after the wedding of the couple from the last book, and Dear George is all alone. He realizes that he's very happy for all of his friends who found love in the first 6 books of the series, but he wants companionship for himself. He decides he would like to marry again and has a very specific lady in mind. He first meets Dora in book 4 a year ago when visiting Vincent's estate, and he decides to return to her cottage and propose marriage. Now, Dora's backstory is that her mother ran off with a man when she was 17 and caused a huge scandal in the family. Dora's younger sister, Agnes, was only 5 years old at the time, so Dora pretty much forfeited her debut to stay and care for Agnes. Eventually, when her father remarried, Dora moved to her current town to be the music teacher there, and she's lived independently for many years. She had been awed by the Duke since she first met him, and after the initial shock of the proposal, she agrees to marry him. So, this book offers a soft, slow build of friendship and companionship between Dora and George, and we can see how much they begin to enjoy each other's company. This book was delightful to read, and I really couldn't put it down because I wanted so badly to find out how Dora deals with her mother's abandonment and how George deals with his past. As always, Balogh knows how to pack in all the emotion in her stories, and we get a shiny epilogue with all of our survivors reuniting again with their new families. So that's it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. Links to all the books I've talked about are in the description box. Like and subscribe so you don't miss future videos, and you can follow me on Instagram at randomolive.